to use the PhoneGap libraries to get information from the built-in compass on the mobile device. The compass, of course, is there to show you what direction the device is pointing. I've created this time an iPhone app, and I'm going to go ahead and take out all of the unnecessary parts of the template and bring us down to just Cordova and the index page. And I'm going to empty my trash there. And now the next thing I'm going to do is load this into my text editor. So I'm going to open it with my favorite text editor. And in the text editor, we'll make some modifications to the original code here. I, out of habit, take out everything here except the link to Cordova. This goes out too. You've seen me do this a number of times before. And then we're down to all we really need, which is what you see here. The script link to Cordova and our basic document structure for HTML. So now if we're going to use the compass, we can use the compass in one of two ways. First, we can, with some level of frequency, get a reading from the compass which shows what direction the device is pointed. So as the user moves and points in different directions, the actual compass can reflect different values. Or we can get it on demand. We're going to go ahead and get it on demand. So I'm going to set up a button here. And I'll just make this comp button, short for compass button. And we'll write on the button get heading. And then we need someplace to actually put the heading, someplace to output it. So I'll use the HTML5 output tag here. And we'll output that with an ID of heading. Don't forget my closing slash. All right, so let's write some JavaScript now that actually interacts with PhoneGap. So first thing I need to do is make sure the device is ready. So we'll set up a window onload event with an anonymous function. And we're waiting here for the device ready event. So when the device ready event occurs, we're going to call a function named init, and I'll set the last attribute to false. Here in the init function, we've got to grab that button we just created and use that to actually get the heading. So let's get the button. Of course, I'm going to use getElementById, and we call the button comp button. And we're going to add an event listener, listening for a click event. And then we'll call get direction, and again make that false. So when the device initializes, it's going to run the device ready event, which we'll call our init function. That init function is going to add the listener to the button. The button itself will call the get direction function. So now our third function is the get direction function. Now the get direction function is the one that's actually going to read the compass. So we're going to read the compass just once. So we're going to use the get current heading method as opposed to the watch heading method, which would get it at some frequency that we set, for example, every 200 milliseconds or something. We're just getting it this one time. So we're calling navigator.compass.getCurrent heading. Now, as is commonly the pattern with PhoneGap, we've got to deal with both success and failure. So if we succeed and get the heading, we'll call the success function. Otherwise, we'll call the failure function. So let's write both those function stubs. And the success function will take some type of heading object, while the failure function we'll take an error object. Let me correct that typo right there. Let's deal with the failure first. The error object, we can get an error code that we can alert out to the user like this. Compass error. And then you'll note that this error object has been passed in right here, so we can address error.code, and that'll give us a specific code from an enumeration of codes that exists within PhoneGap and give us more insight into exactly what's going on. Now, with the success heading, now we're going to have to deal with the heading itself. Here's how we get it. I'll go ahead first off and figure out where we're putting it, which is in the heading output. So get element by ID, heading. And don't forget that's on line 54. That's this little output area right here. And we're going to set the inner HTML of that to where we passed in the variable heading, but we need to get the magnetic heading property. So heading, again, if successful, will give us the magnetic heading property, and that has from 0 to 359 what direction you're heading, 90 being east, 180 degrees being south, and so on. All right, so we've got everything we need here. Now, the unfortunate part of this is you need to test on a real device. You can't send heading to the iOS simulator. You've got to test on an actual iPad or iPhone to make sure this works. But let's at the very least make sure that this builds and we haven't made any actual errors. So we're going to go ahead and very easy to build the iOS apps. We just got to open the Xcode project. So we double click the Xcode project file that's within the files built by PhoneGap. And that's going to open our Xcode environment. All right, it's that moment where we keep our fingers crossed. We've got our Xcode environment up here. And let's go ahead and test on the iPhone simulator. We're going to click Run, and our application's being compiled. So the iPhone simulator should pop up here in just a second. We can see whether it runs without errors. And, well, look what we got here. It doesn't look like a button, so let's go back. We can do it right here inside of the Xcode environment. Let's see if we can see something wrong with our button. So we'll go down here, button ID equals comp button. Let's see here. Ah, there it is. We didn't close a quote right here. All right, so let's try it one more time. And we should see our button. Okay, there's our button. Let's click. And we got an error, a compass error, which means it's working. Because remember that the error is trapped by the error function, and there's our alert, compass error, and the error code was 20. So even though we couldn't test on the actual device, this is working. Now, for those of you who are going to be writing applications that use the compass and some other features, something you should be aware of is this thing called Vimov's iSimulate. This will allow you to do pretty extensive testing. Now, you still need your device, but what you don't need necessarily is the developer certificate on the iPhone. So you could test with this and your device and the simulator and get some really good information about how your compass is working. All right, so that's the compass in HTML5 and PhoneGap running on the iPhone.